Next speaker is Deirdre Clemons, who wishes to speak on curriculum issues.
Hi there. I have grave reservations on the curriculum in Collier County schools. We're new to Florida, and so when my kids started coming home with their work, I would see things that caused me concern, especially in language arts. For example, they'd have an article touting the praises of 50 Cent. He's a disreputable rapper who's always in legal trouble. There was an article on Harry Potter versus Twilight, but it emphasized the movie actors and the box office revenues. And then there was other ones where should parents be allowed to let their children compete on nationally televised talent shows because psychologists argue it's psychologically damaging to children, and the discussion was about are parents being irresponsible who do that. And there are several more examples of this tabloid type reading, but there was also a multiple choice English assignment which at first glance looks like a grammar test, such as pick the correct verb, but it isn't. It's just a narrative of the tragic effects of divorce on a child. And then last week they had to read Battling Against Social Anxiety Disorder in Language Arts. I've also had several Sunshine readers, read them with my kids, The False Prince, one for the Murphys, and Dead Boys, and each seem to have the same running theme. It's a theme of violence coupled with tyrannical abusive adults neglecting helpless youngsters. And these are not isolated examples of questionable material being fed to the children in our school. It seems systemic. It's not just language arts. There are problems in social studies, where my kids came home one day and told me that we had descended from apes, all without the benefit of the teacher ever mentioning that there is a theory of evolution. And then there was science, where the kids are being shown an out-of-date film on global warming presented as fact, when the latest news is that we're in a 15-year cooling trend globally. Now, at the high school level in language arts, the classics are nowhere to be seen. The kids are reading mostly contemporary authors and stories such as The Injustice of a High School Valedictorian, somewhere in Florida, who was reportedly being deported immediately after graduation, even though her father was serving in the U.S. military. The kids were also required to read in tandem with that the DREAM Act. And then this past week, the essay portion of the SAT test prompted the students to write about society's role in fixing the income gap. There's no Ben Franklin in the curriculum, and what is the founding father, the stuff about the founding fathers is cursory and incomplete. But when I put all this together in my own mind, I think this curriculum shows an alignment with progressive ideologies designed to deeply influence our children. Now, I'm not against people having different political beliefs and stripes, but what I do mind is that my tax dollars are being spent to promote partisan political philosophies at the expense of my child getting a good education. Schools are not supposed to be politicized to the point of becoming an indoctrination machine for certain people. This would be tantamount to stealing our children's birthright to get a great education, which is supposed to teach children to think independently and intelligently. And an education should help our children develop into well-rounded individuals with a deep awareness of themselves and how to relate to others in the world at large.
Your time is up, ma'am.
I think Common Core equals indoctrination of political progressivism, and we need to get it out of the schools.
Deirdre Clemons wants to speak on BYOD.
Hi there. Thank you for this opportunity. I just want to make it clear that people who are against BYOD are not against PCs or computerized learning. They're not against schools having fixed PCs, in one spot and the kids using those. But at the very least, BYOD puts pressure on parents to spend a lot of money on devices and possibly internet service plans and contracts. And there will be problems with kids comparing each other's tools. And then what do the underprivileged kids do? They come to school and look like losers. And as we've heard at a previous board meeting, there are a lot of negatives developmentally to using these devices, and that's why the elites in our world who are in the know, their children attend private schools that don't allow those devices because they already know how it affects kids and they don't think it's good. But as a mother, I can tell you that I won't allow my grade schoolers to use it, and don't allow them to take it. And no matter what the policy is, I won't allow them to take it in the future. And I would encourage others to just boycott it too. My instincts and experience has shown me that it's a distraction. It short-circuits thinking skills. It cuts down on the time kids need to think, ponder, deduce information. And kids are in their developmental stage where they're not necessarily good at self-control or have good judgment skills. They're not good at self-moderating abilities yet, all of which is needed in relation to internet access. And parents are fully aware of these types of problems. We deal with it every day in our homes, and it's not easy. If anything, school should be a device-free zone for learning. Device-free zone, not computer-free. Device-free zone for learning. Example, my high schooler says that in every class, she is asked repeatedly and every day by other students to repeat what the teacher just say, because they were busy doing something else on their device while the teacher was talking. And why did they ask her? Because she doesn't have a device. And by the way, she's a straight A student. Now, when I first heard the school district was implementing BYOD, I was incredulous, as were all the parents that I personally have talked to. So it made me wonder, well, how does something like this become a policy? Because instinctually, everybody else is like, I don't want to be a policeman of my child in the device. I've got enough to do. Well, it makes me wonder, is the school board made up of Collier County families, like me, peers, as it were? Because I believe if the board is made up of people in this county who represent us and families, and they also have children, and the more the merrier, the better, I believe, then I don't think we'd have this policy if it was peers on this board. You may have many, many years of education and advanced degrees, but no one is more of an expert on children and on my child than we, the parents. And we are here to say absolutely not to BYOD. And I think if you would be fair and put it to a vote, then you would find that out. The parents would say absolutely not. We want our kids to learn, not to be distracted. Thank you. Hi, thank you for having us here. This isn't really a thumbs up or thumbs down on the superintendent. It's really about preempting and let's put it this way. This great country of ours came into being on the issue of representation. Our founders created this nation to be a representative republic, and that's made it the envy of all the other nations around the world. We have a government by the people. We each have a voice and a vote. Now, the people of this county are about to elect 3 new board members in August so that everyone can be represented and have a vote. Now, I have full confidence that this board would not want to be perceived as un-American. However, I'm afraid that this attempt to extend the contract 2 more years beyond what is actually necessary creates a sense of uneasiness in our community. It may unfortunately be perceived as an attempt to shut out the voters as well as the incoming board members simply because of the timing immediately preceding an election. And I do think processes are important. They're there for a good reason. This is a premature vote, and I hope you're going to prove to the parents and teachers of this county that you're not going to proceed with it. If it stands, I'm afraid the confidence in this community will be undermined in this board, and we'd like you to consider the bigger picture. There are more good reasons than not to follow the proper procedures and timing in this matter, not the least of which is retaining our trust in the show of goodwill. And we believe that you shouldn't disenfranchise the voters or the new board members with this premature vote that may end up looking like a political maneuver to the people that you serve. We're all neighbors here. And why unnecessarily estrange a large portion of the community by an ill-timed business decision that to most seems unethical? So I implore you to wait till the proper time to renew the superintendent's contract for 2016 to 2018 to avoid any impression of impropriety at this time. How is waiting 2 years beyond now instability? This upcoming election will change some of the faces on the board, but not the goals of the great education for our children in this county. I have confidence in the people of this county, and I have confidence in their ability to vote and elect good people that they choose to reflect the will that they have for their children. And that's the American way. I think we can trust it. We have put our trust in you by voting you in, so please continue to trust in the good people of Collier County in return as we look forward to the results of the election in August and working together in this coming year. Thank you. Well, now that the big vote is over, one might think we're all gathered here to discuss merely school policies and procedures and unethical moves on the part of the board. But I suggest that anyone who has eyes to see or ears to hear can see there's a war going on right now in America, and it's for the soul of America. It's a war on the Constitution, it's a war on marriage and family, it's a war on deeply held religious beliefs, and it's a war on truth when people deny that this nation was purposely created on the foundation of Judeo-Christian beliefs. This country and all our freedoms cannot continue to exist without those Judeo-Christian foundations. And now the most tragic war of all, with the greatest consequences for our freedom and our families, the war for the minds and souls of our children. Our whole future depends on the outcome of this war, and up until this point, this war has only been waged on college campuses, where professors fill the heads of our children with pro-Marxist, anti-American rhetoric. Well, thanks to Jeb Bush, Bill Gates, Pierce Publishing, and others who stand to enrich themselves and gain power, this battle for the future of America is now being brought to your local schools through Common Core. Common Core, touted as standards, is actually the Trojan horse to put into place a curriculum for the sole purpose of indoctrinating our children in progressive anti-American thought. It is an attempt to influence not only your children's political persuasion, but to erase our history and foundation. Once our children are all homogenized, it'll be the demise of an opposing party. However, it'll also be the end of freedom, the Constitution, and America as she was created to be. It's an unbloody coup from the inside out, and our children will be their useful idiots. And if you think some of the progressives on this school board here don't know what's happening, you're sadly mistaken. Ask the teachers who've had to deal with draconian and Gestapo-ish tactics in their classrooms so that there is a consolidation of power to complete a certain mission. And observe the way this board repeatedly turns a deaf ear to the wishes of parents and teachers as to what is truly beneficial to the students as they roll right over us with their agenda. Like that very well-dressed man stated earlier, that contracts all around the state are extending their contracts for their superintendents unnaturally long to lock things in. And that is why they've unethically brought forward this vote to retain the superintendent so ridiculously early, because nothing is going to get in the way of their winning their war for the minds of our children. They need to solidify their power before the people have their say on August 26th. And they don't represent us. They've broken trust with us. They hold their own policies above the welfare of our children. Now it's time for the parents of Collier County to stand up for our children and our teachers. We will not allow our teachers and our children to be held captive by this board. In fact, there are over 400 children this year leaving their previous Collier County public schools and heading to either charter, private, parochial schools that truly put the welfare of children, parents, and teachers first while preserving the freedom and joy of true learning in the classroom without the bane of Common Core BYOD. And even though I've chosen that for my children, I won't stop advocating for all the children in Collier County, especially those most disadvantaged. Thank you. Hi. You're going to go full steam ahead on BYOD with only 6% of parents responding? Really? I think you need to find out what the parents want. In regard to the unethical way the superintendent's contract was extended, I believe there's a reason why the school board didn't follow the correct protocol in an exercise of prudence and courtesy on behalf of the Collier County taxpayers that would have ensured that everyone's represented and heard. And I think it's because they believe they know better than parents, especially in regard to Common Core and BYOD. They don't want us or our newly elected board members getting in the way of the agenda. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about Common Core and BYOD and what that brings to our schools. My daughters came home and told me that in history they learned that we came from apes. No qualifiers, no theory of evolution, just we came from apes. Also that Thanksgiving is a hurtful holiday that the Indians that we've basically exterminated don't like. And in science, we're in global warming, and that's settled no matter what the current facts are that pop up. In English, according to Paul Holloman of the Collier County Schools, traditional ideas and values are repressive in many ways, and that's why they recommend the Sunshine readers as opposed to classics. Classics are not allowed.
Ma'am, will you be speaking on the BYOD
Yeah.
issue? Okay.
I have read all the Sunshine readers. The 5 of them that I read were less than 5 years old. The general theme is tyrannical adults abusing innocent teens. And then there's 50 Cent, Rags to Riches story, and Meet the Twilight characters, and study the box office reviews. The ELA assignments look like People magazine articles. And then they watched several movies in English, one of which was Lord of the Rings, where they watched Gollum bite off the finger of Frodo.
Ma'am, you have asked to speak on BYOD. I request that you do so.
The last thing I have to say is that we have a brand new AP class from Common Core curriculum. It's a U.S. history course where absolutely every event is viewed through the lens of the maltreatment of Indians, blacks, and women. The other running theme is that anyone who sees that everywhere where the words conservative, Republican, or capitalist are, they only refer to greedy, selfish, stonewalling people who block everything that the progressive Democrats, liberals do, who have been the only people that have helped the history of these unfortunate groups in our country. And they are consistently touted as the only group that ever helped the plight of the everyday man, women, and blacks. And there's one section that seems
Ma'am,
to
you
infer that the
are
Red Scare
talking
is
to
silly
Common
and unfair,
Core, but
stating
you're
that
supposed to
most
speak on
Americans are okay
BYOD.
with socialism.
So I would
But
request
the
that...
last thing that they will be learning in BYOD
Thank
is
you.
that one of the questions will be the American Revolution. Can it really be called a revolution? And the suggestion for the correct answer is no. Because after the war was over, nothing really changed for blacks or women. In fact, they claim it was really a war between the elites in America, Jefferson and Washington against the elites in England. Nothing changed because Washington and Jefferson were still just as rich as before after the war. And these were all the
Your
great
time
things
is
our
up,
kids are
ma'am.
doing. But here's the silver lining for all
Ma'am, your
this.
time is up.
When you get the results of Common Core
Madam
and
Chair, would you
BYOD, the
please
schools
assist
in
me in
this
this?
area that don't use them will have much better outcome, and you'll be responsible for the failure of the rest of the kids. Hi. Congratulations to our new board members and Roy Terry for making it back again. Elections are a great reminder of the order of things, and that is that the parents are the primary educators of their children, and so we elect and we hire our school board to execute our will with our children. So we are requesting that you hold a workshop to go back over the materials and the curriculums in our schools. Why? Because two reasons. Parents are seeing some very concerning material in the schools at all levels, and because of the controversy over Common Core, our governor has given us a great gift in HB 684, which gives the school board the responsibility and the duty by law to pick materials that are concise and accurate, that promote patriotism and good citizenship. So we are beginning to realize that Common Core is not really standards. It's a Trojan horse to deliver certain ideologies to our kids. And it's ending up looking like a curriculum of opinions, and those opinions are anti-American, pro-socialist rhetoric, which rather than create good citizens, it promotes malcontents who view the U.S. and our free market economy as oppressive and unjust. And we think that these skewed perceptions are tantamount to stealing our children's birthright to freedom, because after all, ignorance of history dooms one to repeat it. So our statutes luckily support us by requiring that the history courses in the state of Florida must be accurate and factual, not points of view and constructed, that it's required by law to explain the founding of the republic, free markets, promote patriotism, good citizenship, and preserve our values and institutions. And I contend that probably the AP U.S. history course is really illegal because it does not promote those things. And we have other problems in literature that we can discuss later, but I have with me a packet of examples of common curriculum that we have in our schools right now, grade school, middle school, high school, AP level, only in history. I'd like to give you each a packet of samples of things that are very concerning to parents, and we need to get this stuff out of our schools now like our laws require, and the governor is giving us an opportunity to do that. We cannot live under a dictatorship of relativism where we cannot know the truth or reality for certain. All ideologies are not of equal value, and we want to ensure our kids have growth in virtue, truth, which includes facts, so that we may have a structure for a civil society. We cannot have myopic and skewed materials in the classroom. That is why we're falling behind the rest of the world. We're 38th in the world in education. It's because we're teaching opinions rather than facts. Let's get back to a good old-fashioned education. I'd like to give you these materials now. Thank you.
If you would be, Ms. Clemons, if you would give them with the board secretary.
Good evening. At the last board meeting, I left you each a packet of examples of factually inaccurate textbook materials in history at all levels of education in Collier County. Today I have examples of English materials being used here in Collier, which you may find disturbing as I did. And because of these unsettling materials, I and several others of this community have met individually and more than once with our legislative delegation to share these examples. We had meetings with Representatives Hudson, Pasadomo, Richter, Caldwell, and Rodriguez. They were very surprised and shocked by these examples. So we do appreciate the board voting for a curriculum workshop because many more folks are paying attention and becoming alarmed. However, I think one workshop will not be sufficient because we are seeing serious problems not only in history and ELA, but math and science as well. We need multiple workshops given the enormity of the problem vis-a-vis Common Core materials. Although we call it Florida Sunshine State Standards, much of what is in our ELA and math classrooms is Common Core material. Although we want to call in, and also we want to call in experts in each field with proven track records to present and advise at these workshops. and that includes the high-stakes testing workshops. Since July, SB 864 makes it clear that instructional material and curriculum choices are the constitutional responsibility of the district school boards. And Florida State Statute 1003.42 is very clear. It states we must use books and materials that meet the highest standards for professionalism and historic accuracy, and that American history shall be viewed as factual and not constructed. We need an immediate focus on history studies because of factually inaccurate and politically indoctrinating materials, and also ELA, because as you will see from this packet that I will give you, it's harmful to our kids and not in line with Florida state statutes that stress instilling qualities of patriotism, good citizenship, self-control, and nurturing and protecting our democratic values and institutions. So I am here today as a parent, a taxpayer, and an associate of Parents Rock and Southwest Florida Citizens Alliance to inform you that we're forming a committee, the Collier Citizens Instructional Materials Assessment Committee, and our purpose is to review instructional materials to assess whether the materials the board will approve meet the highest standards for professionalism and historic accuracy. It's evident from these packets that I gave you that we do have issues. We already have very qualified parents, taxpayers, educators, veterans, grandparents, and professionals that comprise this committee, and others may join. I want to emphasize that our intent is to work in a constructive, productive way for the benefit of our children to ensure they're being taught from materials that meet the highest standards for professionalism and historic accuracy, and that truly follow and fulfill our Florida state requirements for education. Thank you. Hi, I just want to say Mr. Solano was an expert brought in to make a presentation. It was 20 minutes long, not including discussion and Q&A. How is that different than what Ms. Donalds asked for? Because she's also asking for information from experts to help make good decisions for our school system. Now, with the computer thing, I'm wondering why spend money at this time, that kind of money, when the whole state of Florida and the country in general is starting to backpedal and rethink Common Core and high-stakes testing. The $300,000 will only take care of retrofitting 3 schools out of 52. And what about future upgrades, maintenance, and replacement costs in the future for all 52 schools? It sounds like a huge ongoing money pit problem for our taxpayer. Not spending the money will help push back that data mining problem and maybe even the high-stakes testing problem a little bit. Why don't we go back to paper and pencil tests to protect our kids from possible computer data tracking and data mining, and at the same time save ourselves a whole lot of money? Because think about it, an argument could be made for if you're going to take a math test, I'd like a paper and pencil. If I'm going to take a writing test, I'd like to write it. So I think we need to just think about this in a more logical, because the future is a big black hole when it comes to spending money to keep up with technology, and our school system's not going to be able to afford it at some point. Thank you. Hi, I'm just going to read something from fairtest.org from Bob Schaefer because it's so good. High-stakes testing turns many classrooms and schools into test prep centers rather than offering rich, engaging, well-rounded instruction. Rote and narrow instruction bores and alienates students, making them tune out and feel like they're little more than their scores. High school exit exams push many thousands of students out of schools, and as a result of these factors, urban graduation rates have decreased. Some students see no realistic option other than dropping out. Some are deliberately pushed out or fail the tests. Either way, these young people are much more likely to end up in trouble or in prison. If the goal is a rich all-round education of the whole child in a supportive environment, then it's best to avoid high-stakes standardized tests, which usually end up dominating the curriculum and instruction. If the nation wants a school system that works well for all children, assessment and accountability must reflect and support high-quality teaching and learning. The National Assessment of Educational Progress shows that overall gains in reading and math have just about halted since No Child Left Behind was implemented. Progress toward closing achievement gaps has also slowed. Test and punish programs are wreaking havoc in many urban neighborhoods by contributing to school closures and resulting in community destabilization. Teachers' unions are pushing back on test abuse with campaigns and resolutions. The NEA has launched a campaign against toxic testing, and they called Education Secretary Arnie Duncan to resign. The American Federation of Teachers voted to put him on an improvement plan. More colleges are joining the test optional admissions trend, where there are now more than 830 accredited bachelor degree granting colleges and universities that don't require tests at all, the regular test scores. Who is most often hurt by these practices? Students from low-income minority group backgrounds, English language learners, students with disabilities, They're and the ones who are more likely to be denied diplomas. They'll be retained in grade, placed on a lower track, or unnecessarily put in remedial education programs. They are more likely to receive a dumbed-down curriculum based heavily on rote drill and test practice. This ensures they will fall farther and further behind their peers. Many drop out, some ending up in school-to-prison pipelines. My thoughts are back off computer tests as of today. Today, if you do an ACT score, you can choose if, when, and who to release those scores to. That makes a difference. But if there becomes no choice, because every test you have is in a database, that's your life in data. And it may not be a true reflection of who you are and what your abilities are. It's a total lack of privacy, and it's a loss of control of your information. And the tech costs will be astronomical over the years. And soon, devices will not be optional. You'll have to supply your own. Thank you. Hi there. I'd like to thank Dr. Patton for offering refreshments and making us feel welcome.
Can I just ask you to give your name when
Deirdre
you come up to the
Clemons.
podium? Thank you.
I would like to thank Dr. Patton for offering refreshments and making us feel welcome during the Citizens Book Review, and Ms. Lichter for opening the door and facilitating the public's request. When my family moved to Florida last year, where there was much touting of A schools, but here's the reality. According to the national ACT test scores, Florida is 47th out of 50 states, and it has been for many years. This chart is for the last 20 years. In fact, each time a federal program has been implemented, such as No Child Left Behind or Race to the Top, Florida ACT scores drop and continue to drop. Common Core / Florida Sunshine State standards are more the same. The more we move in this direction, the worse our kids fare. It's clear we need reform, but top-down is not working. Collier County's problem is not due to inferior facilities, nor is it the fault of our dedicated teachers, nor do we have a money problem. It's all about materials. I was shocked by the poor quality of materials in our schools. We found that rather than basic foundational material based on objective fact, there seems to be a systemic problem. President Pro Tem of the House, Matt Hudson, dubbed it a curriculum of opinions, especially where history is concerned, as did many other legislators that we showed our findings to. There's a clear saturation of political bias and opinion. As far as language arts materials, themes inappropriate for age groups show up across the board. We also found too much reference to religion in general. Religion and political viewpoint are subjective in nature. Parents should not be undercut by subjective and possibly incorrect comments on religion or politics. Nor should parents be undermined by inappropriate reading materials. Traditionally, those things are explored at the university level when the child is no longer a minor under their parents' authority. It seems Florida test scores are going down in relation to how much basic foundational knowledge is being replaced by opinion, political bias, and inferior reading material. Senate Bill 864 gives us a chance to use local power to get superior materials in our classrooms, and Florida educational statutes are a tremendous guideline for us. So when the board forms its Instructional Materials Committee, we need to look at the nation's top-rated schools and mirror those. I propose that parents' wishes and views be the foremost consideration because we, the parents, are the primary educators of our children, and we charge you and our teachers to help us in our mission. We want quality materials that are parent approved because we are actually the experts on what is good and wholesome and beneficial to our own children's growth intellectually and morally. Families are the biggest stakeholders at the education table, and so we insist on driving the process. However, we cannot discuss this issue to the extent necessary in a 3-minute format. I'm formally requesting the board more time to present our findings next Tuesday to begin an in-depth discussion on the problems and the solutions. Thank you. Hello, I'm Deirdre Clemons. Pope Francis was quoted as saying, educational manipulation of children has its roots in totalitarianism. Schools are becoming re-education camps. I have 10 kids and the oldest 5 have 9 degrees between them. They've attended public schools, private schools, and when we were overseas, I homeschooled them. I'm a successful educator and I pick curriculum. I believe our kids are being put in harm's way, especially concerning U.S. history, where instead of objective facts, including names, dates, and events, our books are filled with political bias and opinion with the effect of subverting our children's minds against this republic and our free market system. This is directly opposed to our law in Florida, Education Code 1003.42, which states, and I quote, "We must use books and materials that meet the highest standards for professionalism and historic accuracy. American history must be viewed as factual, not constructed, with arguments in support of our Republican form of government, nurturing and protecting democratic values and institutions, teaching the importance of free enterprise to our economy, stressing patriotism, responsibility, citizenship, respect, and self-control." I found a problem in history, and it's systemic. How about some examples? Here's a history assignment from third graders at Pelican Bay that says, in essence, Thanksgiving is a hurtful holiday because it stands for the beginning of the end of the Indians. And here's an 8th grade assignment from Pine Ridge Middle School called What's an American? That states any person who truly wants to be an American already is, even though they've never set foot in America and live in another country. And if your child is in 12th grade, U.S. government class in Naples, their book is Principles and Practice. It has 2 pages comparing capitalism and socialism. It tells that Marx argued the working class was treated unfairly by the capitalist system, that socialism best protects workers' rights, and as an example, the UK, where health care is paid for by the government, is shown. The last paragraph states that the inequalities of capitalism harm the greater good, and it is fair to provide everyone with their basic needs. What do you think a teenager takes out of that? If your child is in an AP US history course, you will find that it concentrates more on historical thinking skills rather than names, dates, and events. Now here's a sample of a long essay question that they put on their website that could be on your final exam. Question is, was the American Revolution truly a revolution? Here it states that one correct answer could be no, because George Washington, Jefferson, and Adams were just as rich before the war as after, and besides, nothing changed for women, Indians, and blacks. Now, if your child is in a regular high school U.S. history course, they'll be using this, the Americans. And in this, they will learn about the 19 socialist mayors who are touted with their progressive reforms. They focused on dismissing corrupt and greedy private business owners of utilities and converted them to publicly owned enterprises. And at the end, they give you a summation that progressives, which are also socialists, they admit, are accomplished the 40-hour work week, the end of child labor, and voting rights for black and women, despite Republican, conservative, capitalist business owners who are the foils throughout history, according to all of our books. Thank you. Hi. There's been some talk about possible improprieties concerning the recent inspection of curriculum materials by the Collier Citizens Instructional Materials Assessment Committee. Board member Ms. Curtolo mentioned her concerns in the last regular board meeting. And as the person responsible for calling for the committee, I share her concerns. It was at the December 9th board meeting that I made a public invitation open to all concerned parents, educators, taxpayers, veterans, grandparents, and professionals to join me in inspecting the instructional materials. I personally arranged for 2 inspection dates over Christmas break with board member Kelly Lichter. I requested these dates keeping in mind that many folks, especially parents and teachers, have more time during break. But if opening up the building during break would be an issue, Ms. Patton should have advised Ms. Lichter to this, considering Ms. Lichter is new to the board. Also mentioned by Ms. Curtolo as a concern was the fact that there was no sign-in for the public and that other board members were not informed of the event. These are operational issues under the purview of the superintendent, who not only welcomed us with refreshments, but she supplied us with a detailed sheet on info on how to review textbooks, which is very kind of her, and thank you. There was no going behind the scenes in our inspection, as the superintendent was present and fully aware of it, and is evidenced by the fact that we were thrilled to have such heavy hitters such as Ms. Kathy Ryan, school board candidate for District 3, and other teachers of Collier County. So I think those facts should clear up any concerns in that. I'd like to mention just a concern about Board Policy 1010 that says it's the primary duty of the school board to establish policies and of the superintendent to administer the policies. And then right after that it says policies shall not be originated or changed without recommendation of the superintendent. Now it says one thing in the first sentence and the opposite in the second sentence. How is it possible that the person who's hired by the board can then turn around and essentially gag their employer? This policy is not consistent. It almost looks as if the second sentence may have been artificially inserted later. This is a perfect example of why at the next policy meeting it should be brought up that the board may need its own attorney. This policy demonstrates that there may be 2 opposing interests, hence 2 sides to represent, or at least, at the very least, get a second opinion, since this policy is not clear and it's contradictory. I'm extremely concerned about this because it seems like the board members are being held hostage by the very people they hire, and that means the constituents of Collier County are being hogtied, and that is unacceptable. Thank you. Just real quick, you are here to help families, not tear down families or get in the way of a family being a family. They need their family dinner hour. They need to be hungry when they get home so they'll sit down and talk to their parents. This is so important. We're trying to help families. We're really concerned about families. We understand that the kids who don't do well in school are the ones that come from families that aren't spending time together. You need to let these people take responsibility for their kids. We don't need the government to take responsibility for these kids. Let the parents be parents and encourage them to be parents by not making it easy for them to be absent parents. Thank you. Hello, I'd like to talk about our review of the English materials in Collier County High School, some of which are Common Core. Did you know the head of the Department of Education is Arnie Duncan, who's a sociologist, not an educator? To me, the ELA reading materials look like social engineering, teaching our kids what to think through non-classical reading full of immoral and abusive behaviors devoid of hope and goodness. The general message seems to be nothing is true, everything is permissible. I think it's designed to pervert our kids' minds against family values, which I believe make up most of the parents' views in this community. At Gulf Coast High School in AP English, the syllabus requires the kids to read Angela's Ashes, which includes marital infidelity, abandonment, promiscuity, and masturbation. They are required to read the article, and I quote, shitty first drafts, and Bullet in the Brain, about a man's last thoughts as that bullet enters his brain. They read Body Rituals Among the Necrema Indians, which discusses sadism, masochism, and customs concerning intercourse. Now, this may be an AP class, but these students are minors under the age of 18. The textbook for grade 11 centers most of the stories on the victims of the American culture, victims of racism, sexism, and capitalism, and also includes a story claiming that the cause of the disappearance of the Mayans and Easter Island people was climate change and overpopulation. Now, in the Prentice Hall Reader, there's a story about how taking your husband's last name is degrading, and an article describing the medical harvesting of organs from someone whose heart is still beating. In the AP Lit book, The Women of Brewster Place, we have prostitution, a lesbian relationship, and gang rape. In Honors English 4, they read The Awakening, where a woman abandons her family, awakened by her passions for another man, and a theme of self-discovery. However, when the affair is over, she chooses suicide over the prospect of returning to her waiting family, suicide viewed as freeing. Up until this year, The Bluest Eye and Clockwork Orange were on our ELA reading list. The Bluest Eye contains graphic incest between father and daughter, and Clockwork Orange is a book containing severe brutality and pornography. I'm glad these books are finally removed from our list, but how can we trust the people who put them there in the first place? And that's why we need parents to play a primary role, to make sure our kids are not being immersed in material that's age inappropriate and in direct opposition to parents' values damaging our kids. When I brought similar poor reading materials at the middle school level to the attention of this board last year, they asked Paul Holloman, who was Collier School's coordinator of secondary literacy, to reply to me. His answer was to quote his favorite expert in the field, Dr. Stowe, who said, "Many critics believe modern literature to be culturally pernicious, as well as inferior and a clear danger to readers less sophisticated. But what all popular writers know is that the burden of any system of morality finally becomes irksome, even to its most sincere advocates, since it represses certain undying primal impulses which, however outmoded by civilization, need to be expressed." I'd like to suggest that since we have such differing views, why not implement a rating system and a warning system like we do with video games and movies, and let parents decide what is appropriate for their very own children under age 18? It's the right thing to do. Hi there, Deirdre Clemons. Last Thursday in Tallahassee, I had a meeting with Kim McDougall. She's Governor Scott's liaison for education. And she assured us that the governor had given us a great gift in making SB 864 a law. She told us that this law was put there so that parents and local districts could take back control of the materials in the classroom, and provides a legal way to get around the poor instructional materials that swamp our schools, leaving us at the bottom of the heap nationally. Now, it's not just the governor's office. President Pro Tem of the House, Matt Hudson, Kathleen Pasadomo, Matt Caldwell, and Kirk Clausen's representative were shocked at the school materials that we showed them, and they agreed that local power is the solution. So we went to Tallahassee, and we did a presentation for Marlene O'Toole, Dane Eagle, Dwight Bullard, Charles Van Zant, Bruce Antone, Daniel Rollerson, Ben Albritton, Joe Negron, and the list goes on, and got the same reaction from them all, shock and alarm. They understand that the solution lies with the parents and school boards themselves, where constituents can be front and center, involved in watching over their kids and what they're being taught, keeping the elected officials accountable. And that's why SB 864 gives the school board, not the superintendent, the duty and the responsibility of picking the classroom materials. The board must create the curriculum review committees, because that's how we hold you responsible as elected representatives, and that's how we keep the power local and keep our schools a reflection of the will of those served. We want curriculum committees and choices directly under the board's power, as SB 864 requires. This is the spirit and the letter of the law. The superintendent is there to implement what the board decides. This process needs to be connected to the public, and the process is connected to us through the board members, not the superintendent. We want no insiders and elites picking materials and who are not accountable to parents and taxpayers. I agree with Ms. Curtolo that when she stated that a few weeks ago that we must follow the laws carefully. We live in the Sunshine State and we have sunshine laws. The state representatives that I have spoken to made it clear that they want the local communities to retain local power concerning educational material issues. And that was the purpose of SB 864. In fact, we have at least 3 board members with expertise and experience in picking curriculum. As parents, teachers, and taxpayers, we refuse to be held hostage and for our kids to be held hostage by so-called experts and administrators, especially those who've never had children. The buck stops with us, and we have every right to demand the best for our kids. As parents, we know what that is. This school district belongs to us. The children belong to us. We elect you. Our tax monies pay the salaries and provide the school infrastructure, and you serve us, and you must answer to us. Who do I want on the committee? Parents who are teachers and teachers who are parents, and people who've done it before, such as some of you on the board there tonight. Thank you. I see a ton of future problems with objectionable materials because I went to the teacher, I went to the principal, I went to the SAC committee, I went to the school board, I went to our local representatives, I've gone to Tallahassee, I've gone everywhere. And at all layers in this school district, I ran into people who do think these socialist brainwashing opinion pieces are fine. Because many of those working in the district departments are products of this subpar, bottom of the heap Florida school system. They've been dumbed down and they believe the lies that are in those history books. Now let's be honest. We parents, patriots, freedom fighters, godly principled people who truly care for children are up against progressive socialists hell-bent on brainwashing our kids into being faithless, mindless, non-thinking, immoral, government-dependent automatons. This policy 2520 makes sure that parents are shut out and shut down concerning the welfare and benefit of their own children by childless socialist ideologues. That's unacceptable. We will fight for our children's minds and souls, and we will never quit. Now, I don't begrudge anyone the right to be a far left or Marxist or socialist or whatever you want to be. But parents will not allow those kinds of people to turn their innocent children into one. That's not what public education is for. I'm particularly disappointed in one particular person on this board. Newsflash, we're not going away. There isn't anything more important to us than our children, and we will fight for them. And we will not let the far left socialist progressives in this town on these boards that don't have kids, don't like kids, don't understand what parents want for their children. These are our schools. They should be the way the parents want them. Whether we're right or wrong, they're our schools and our children. Thank you. Hi, I would like to respectfully suggest that maybe consider using the April workshop date to readdress the curriculum materials issue. Our January 20th curriculum workshop was kind of hijacked by a policy read for 2520, so we still haven't had a proper curriculum workshop, which the board members expressed a desire to have. The Collier Citizens Instructional Materials Assessment Committee, comprised of community members, would like the opportunity to bring our findings to the school board as well as the public in a workshop setting, which we have not properly had as of yet. Thank you. Hi, I think we need to take another look at the textbook adoption policy because last week, on March 5th, President Pro Tem of the Florida House, Matt Hudson, did a radio interview with Drew Steele. And he stated that he was very disappointed that the Collier County School Board voted 3-2 in its last meeting to delegate their responsibility and duty of picking materials to the superintendent. He said that the vote was not in line with our new law, SB 864, and then he congratulated Mrs. Donalds and Ms. Lichter for voting against the policy. He said he was deeply disturbed by the vote. He said SB 864 was supposed to give the authority of choosing materials back to the local community through their elected representatives. And we're lucky because we actually have a policy, 9140, on school board subcommittees. It's been in place for a while. It's a decent policy, seems to be fair and balanced. It dovetails with SB 864, which demands that the school board itself hold the reins on curriculum choices. It's a great policy already here, easily complies with the spirit of SB 864. In fact, it seems to be written to fit hand in glove with that very law. It's a set of guidelines for the board for putting together subcommittees that they are part of themselves, like the one they should be putting together for the Materials and Curriculum Committee adoption. So, Ms. Patton, we have been working with legislators and the governor. That's how we got SB 864, where the board has been charged with the responsibility of choosing not only curriculum materials, but much better curriculum materials. That's why SB 864 is such a big deal, because our curriculum materials are failing our parents and kids, as evidenced by our low scores in nationally normed tests. Lots of people said, don't go down to Florida. Your kids aren't going to get a good education down there. And I would like to change that. Thank you. And so would the legislatures, by the way. I would like to caution the board that this policy may need to be modified in order to address the well-known problem that exists in this district, where there's a yearly shuffling of staff that seems to reflect reward and punishment system. There must be a policy in place to prohibit unfair practices by administration, particularly in view of an effort to retain and recruit employees, which will be discussed at a future workshop. I'd also like to see the board address the problems of contracts for our teachers that are limited for 1 year. There needs to be an attempt made at improving job security for our teachers. These two issues cause low morale and high stress levels for our teachers. And compounding that are the federal attempts at education reforms such as Common Core, aka Sunshine State Standards, and high-stakes testing that leaves teachers gagged, shackled, and abused, or at least feeling abused, by the state and the district in an effort to implement these reforms and improve school grades at all costs. So in conclusion, please put some type of policy in place to stop the unfair practices that may be going on in our district and that no one can talk about without risking their job. And in conjunction with that, I'm calling you to write a policy to protect whistleblowers in this district, and I urge the board to write and adopt a policy for this purpose as soon as possible. Thank you. This policy has been here for a while. It's a good policy, seems to be fair and balanced, and dovetails with SB 864, which demands that the school board itself holds the reins on curriculum choices. It's already here. It easily complies with the spirit of SB 864. In fact, it seems to be written for it. So please do not delete this policy. Keep it in place to implement SB 864 in the way it was intended. I'm trying to figure out why on earth would you take it out unless your goal is to usurp the power of the board and take over its responsibilities, or unless you want to pervert the law, namely SB 864, or unless you want to tie the hands of the newly elected representatives on the board who are a sign of what the people want, the current voice of the people, as in the voters. Why on earth would you take it out? Unless you want to give the governor, the state legislators who represent the people of this great state, the bird, and tell them to take a hike. Or maybe you think you know better than the governor, the legislators, the parents, teachers, and taxpayers of this county. You really need to think about getting better counsel, because this is going against state law SB 864 in putting us in a precarious position. We need to understand and follow the law. We need counsel who understands and follows the law. We need administrators who understand and follow the law. We need a board that understands and follows the law. And the taxpayers and voters of Collier County will not tolerate lawlessness, out-of-control representatives, and an administration that turns a deaf ear not only to the folks they serve, but the laws and lawmakers of Florida. Policy 1010 must be modified primarily to keep all authority with the elected officials, and I'm not the only one who thinks so. So I would like to suggest that the first sentence be retained, where it states it's the primary duty of the school board to establish policies, and that of the superintendent to administer those policies. I would suggest that this statement designates the board as kind of a group or joint CEO, chief executive officers of the district, and the superintendent as the COO, chief operating officer. So I would cross out line 22 that states the superintendent is the CEO. Because to call the superintendent the CEO and the board the chief governing body kind of infers a relationship, for example, like we have at the federal level, where there's an executive branch and a legislative branch with co-equal powers to provide checks and balances for governing. And this model is not reflective of the reality of how this school district is supposed to work. The duties of the members of the school board as elected officials encompass both the legislative and executive offices, which would be the CEO, while the superintendent, a non-elected official, is executing operations as a COO and advisor to the board with no power to check the board's authority or power. The fact that the council to the school district is allowing this language, which encourages the transfer of more and more power to the superintendent, makes one wonder if the public's interest is primary which should be the proper alignment of things. SB 864 was signed into law to put the power back where it belongs, to the parents, taxpayers, and voters, and Matt Hudson affirmed that 864's purpose was to give that local control back to the parents through the authority given to the elected officials. This policy does not reflect state law, as evidenced by the ceding of too much power to the superintendent. Advice from counsel here seems to be misdirected. The board may need to employ a separate attorney that will work to retain the legal and proper power for the true CEOs, which is the board, as opposed to the current council, which seems eager to wrest power from the board in an effort to transfer more power to an unelected superintendent. Moving on, line 30 should include the phrase, new and revised policies can be suggested by board members to the other board members. Take out to the superintendent. And then revise 31 and 32 by adding the board members may bring their own research and report findings during board meetings. The superintendent should not have a monopoly on research and information. The superintendent should not have the power to gag or restrain individual board members in any way if they decide to more diligently pursue the responsibility of their duty as representatives of the families of Collier County. Thank you. I think I'd like to offer my observations on what I believe the basic source of the problem is. Normally the makeup of a school board is, in the past, has been largely older folks with a lot of experience in the education field. That's pretty typical and logical. But in recent years, the federal and state government's attempts at education reform, such as Common Core and high-stakes testing with its data mining component, have left teachers and parents gagged and shackled while they think their children are being abused and used. So there's this tug of war going on that completely precludes any true education, as evidenced by our low scores. However, more and more parents throughout the country are waking up, and they're demanding that these harmful reforms be eliminated. They see the danger to their children and the future of this country. We are waking up to this Trojan horse that is dubbed reform that is harming our kids. So the result of this is that the parents of these children are being abused, and they're now becoming involved. So some, like Miss Donalds and Miss Lichter, after experiencing the harmful effects on their children, do something about it by running for school board. Others, like me, go to the voting booth to vote in other concerned parents in order to get something done to protect the kids. And others, like the Florida legislature, passes laws like SB 864 to help parents and taxpayers in this effort. So here's the nature of the rift on the board. We have two members with boots on the ground by the fact they have small children in the district, like many of us. And you members, being older and having grown children or no children, are not directly impacted, and therefore I don't think truly understand the gravity nor the scope of this problem, through no fault of your own. However, you must listen and become more understanding, because these two women truly represent the parents and therefore the customer of the school district. You need to stop fighting against them and just listen, because they are speaking for the majority of parents with children in this district, the people that you are sworn to serve, the families and taxpayers of this county. But even though there is evidence of an organized smear campaign on these two young mothers going on behind the scenes, the majority of taxpayers and parents in this community voted for them because they reflect their own family values and the concern for the welfare of the children. So do not work against these true voices for the children, the parents, the teachers, and the taxpayers, because you cannot win a war against the good families in this county. You're outnumbered. And no one has better instincts for children than moms. They'll fight and they'll put everything on the line for the welfare of that child, and that's what makes these meetings more than just meetings for policy. It's all about the children, our most precious children, their minds, souls, and their future. And it's not just business as usual, it's personal to us. And that's the kernel of this rift. And it's not a bad thing as long as the rest of you understand and give it the weight that it deserves. Thank you. Through the efforts of parents, teachers, and students, communities around the nation now are realizing that these many long years of top-down education reform after education reform totally fails our children, shortchanging their future. It's becoming clear that these reforms do not offer a solid education, but instead promote behavior modification and conditioning in an attempt to shape our children's minds and values to reject America's foundation of individual rights to liberty and free markets in favor of globalism and collectivism. These reforms have been rewriting our history to infect our kids with anti-Americanism and feeding our kids literature that turns our children against family values and the bedrock foundation of this country, which is our Judeo-Christian heritage. This heritage is what informs our rule of law, which protects our rights endowed to us by the Creator. Now, on top of this curriculum of opinions, as Matt Hudson calls it, the assessments do not measure knowledge required, as our poor ACT scores show, but instead assess how much behavioral modification and thinking has been conveyed. And all this is done on computers so that the children themselves fill in their data mining file. Well, the jig is up, and parents all over America know what is going on, and we do not want anything but actual education for our kids, an education of facts, not opinions, especially where history, science, and math are concerned. So we charge you to please go to Tallahassee this week and champion our cause to get us out of mandated high-stakes testings that's not improving education. Get us out of federal mandates, computer data mining, and Common Core, bringing the local control back on all these issues. We know we have many legislators, parents, and teachers that are on the side of what's best for the children. You can do that. You can solve these problems by supporting SB Bill 1496 and HB 1121 for the families of Collier County. Thank you. Good evening, and I just wanted to remind everybody of one thing, and I'm so glad I had the chance to tell Kelly Owens this before she left, well, during the break, and that was that the infamous school board meeting that went till the early hours of the morning, when we got here that day, the agenda had 75 points on it. It was a policy read, 75 policy points, first reads and second reads. So before we even opened up our big blabbery mouths, we had a huge night ahead of us with policy reads. So let's remember, it's not just us big mouth parents. Somebody loaded up that agenda with 75 policy reads. Thank you.